first thing you notice is how quiet it gets when the last car door shuts. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind that feels like a gift. It's a quiet that has weight. Gravel under your boots. One distant crow. The faint hiss of wind in pine needles. And then your own breathing, suddenly loud, like you're the only moving thing left in a world that decided to stop. You check your phone out of habit. 1 bar. You look up at the tree line. The Appalachian Mountains don't look like monsters from here. They look like the opposite. Rounded, green, almost gentle. Ancient shapes softened by time. A place people photograph for calendars, for autumn leaves, for that word everyone uses when they want to sound peaceful. Serene. But there's a reason these mountains have a reputation that doesn't show up in the brochures. Because the Appalachians aren't dangerous in the obvious ways. They're dangerous in the slow, quiet, ordinary ways that make you underestimate them. And when you hike alone here, the mountains don't have to do anything dramatic to win. They just have to wait. You step onto the trail. At first it's easy. The path is clear. The air smells like damp earth and leaf litter. You pass a stand of rhododendron so thick it feels like a tunnel. Sunlight filters through in thin blades. Somewhere downhill, water runs over rocks with that steady, reassuring sound that says, civilization might be far, but life is close. You tell yourself you've done this before. You tell yourself you've got enough water. You tell yourself you'll be back before dark. You tell yourself that alone just means peaceful. And then, without warning, when the Appalachian Mountains do what they do best, they make the world smaller, not by closing in, by opening up. You crest a ridge, and the view is beautiful rolling layers of blue-green hills fading into haze. But the moment you step down the other side, the view disappears. The trail drops into a hollow. The trees swallow the horizon. The air turns cooler. The light turns dimmer. And suddenly, direction becomes an idea instead of a fact. This is the first truth about hiking alone here. The Appalachians specialize in hiding distance. A mile in the mountains doesn't feel like a mile on a treadmill. A short loop isn't always short. A gentle-looking ridge can turn into a staircase of roots and rocks that steals time without asking permission. A trail that looks straight forward on a screen can become a mess of switchbacks and side paths on the ground. And when you're alone, every little miscalculation becomes personal. No one else to say, we should turn around. No one else to notice the clouds building on the wrong side of the ridge. No one else to catch the moment your confidence starts quietly sliding into stubbornness. The mountains don't punish you for being brave. They punish you for being alone when something small goes wrong. Because in the Appalachians, small is how it starts. A wrong turn, a wet rock, a twisted ankle, a phone that dies faster than you expected because cold steals battery like a thief, a shortcut that looks obvious until it isn't. And then you're not hiking anymore. You're managing a problem. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a story you tell later and a story someone else tries to piece together from a trailhead sign. You keep walking, you pass another junction. 2 paths. One looks more worn. One looks like it gets less sunlight, darker under hemlock shadows. Your map app spins for a second. Then it locks. You pick the worn path. It feels right. 10 minutes later, it feels less right. This is the second truth. The Appalachians are full of trails that look like trails. Old logging roads, game paths, spur trails that lead to viewpoints and then fade into nothing. Side routes made by people avoiding mud. Faint tracks where the leaf cover has been disturbed 1,000 times by boots and hooves and rain. In these mountains, your eyes can lie to you. And if you're alone, there's no second set of eyes to argue back. When you hike with someone else, navigation errors often get corrected before they become disasters. Someone says, "Wait, Didn't the map show a creek crossing? Someone points out that the blazes are missing. Someone notices you've been following a path that trends downhill too long when the route was supposed to climb. When you're alone, doubt becomes your enemy. Because the moment you aren't sure, you start bargaining. It's probably just around the bend. Maybe the trail markers are just sparse here. I'm sure it reconnects. I'll go a little farther. That last sentence is the most common way people disappear. Not into some dramatic mystery, into a little farther. And here's what makes the Appalachian Mountains uniquely brutal about that. They are old mountains, but they are not simple mountains. They are a maze of ridges and hollows and branching drainages. You can walk downhill for an hour and feel like you're making progress, only to realize you've dropped into a bowl of terrain that forces you to climb out the same way you came, and the climb back is harder because you're tired and the day is older. Sound doesn't travel the way you expect. A road can be close on a map and completely unreachable because a gorge sits between you and it like a wall. A river you can hear might be impossible to cross safely. A distant ridge can look like the one you came from until you realize the valleys between them have names you've never learned. When you're alone, the landscape becomes a problem with no witnesses. And then there's the weather. People think of weather as a forecast, sun icon, cloud icon, for chance of rain. But in the Appalachians, weather is a living thing. It moves along ridge lines, it pools in hollers, it shifts with elevation. It turns a warm afternoon into a cold, wet evening without feeling like it changed. It just arrived. A breeze becomes a steady wind. The humidity thickens. The smell of rain comes before the rain. And then the forest goes quiet in that way that makes your skin notice. If you're hiking with someone, that shift becomes a shared decision. We should put on layers. We should turn around. We should avoid the exposed ridge. Alone, you do what people always do when they don't want to be wrong. You delay. You keep moving because moving feels like control. And then the rain hits. Not a gentle drizzle. A hard, soaking rain that turns the trail into a narrow stream. The clay turns slick. Aren't the rocks shine like glass? The routes you didn't think about become traps. This is where hiking alone turns from solitude into risk. Because wet, cold, and tired is a combination that destroys judgment. Even if the temperature isn't dramatic, the sensation is. Damp clothes cling, wind strips heat, your hands get stiff, your fingers lose dexterity. Suddenly opening a snack wrapper feels like work. Suddenly tying a knot feels like a puzzle. And while all of this is happening, time is moving. The light in the forest changes before you notice. The Appalachians don't give you the wide, obvious sunset of open country. Under canopy, the day just fades. 1 minute you can see trail texture. The next minute everything looks like the same dark brown and green. The moment that happens, you either have a plan or you're improvising. Your improvisation is where being alone becomes expensive. Let's talk about the most common thing that ends hikes early. Not bears, not storms, not villains. Feet, ankle, knee, a stumble, a slip. The Appalachians are famous for this kind of terrain, endless uneven steps, roots that look like they're part of the ground until your toe catches them, rocks that are stable until they aren't. When you hike with a partner and someone sprains an ankle, you can stabilize the joint. You can share weight. You can send one person to get help. You can keep the injured person warm while someone else makes decisions. When you hike alone and you sprain an ankle, you have a new reality. You may not be able to walk out. Not hard to walk out. Not painful. Literally not able. And now your plan shifts from hiking to surviving the time it takes to be found, or to find help yourself. People imagine rescue like a switch you flip. You call, someone comes. But the mountains don't work like that. Even if you can call, your location might be vague. Trees and ridges complicate signals. Your phone might connect long enough for half a sentence and then drop. Even if you're on a well-known trail, it can take time for help to reach you. And if you can't call, then everything depends on one question. Did anyone know you were here? If you hike alone and you don't tell anyone exactly where you went and when you planned to be back, you don't become missing right away. You become late. Then you become probably fine. Then you become concerning. And that delay is not a small thing, because in the Appalachians, the difference between uncomfortable night and medical emergency is often measured in simple variables: wetness, wind, and time. A minor injury becomes dangerous when you can't move to stay warm. A small mistake becomes dangerous when darkness forces you to stop. A wrong turn becomes dangerous when you're too tired to climb back to known terrain. This is why hiking alone is not just about what might happen. It's about what happens after something happens. Now, let's address the thing people always jump to: wildlife. Yes, the Appalachians have wildlife: bears, snakes, coyotes, boars in some areas, insects that can make a human miserable, ticks that don't care how tough you are. But wildlife isn't the main reason you shouldn't hike alone. Wildlife is usually predictable. It follows patterns. It avoids humans when it can. The real danger is not a creature leaping out of the bushes. The real danger is you stepping wrong because you were watching the bushes. Still, being alone changes your margin. If you surprise a bear on a narrow stretch, having another person can make you louder, bigger, more obvious. If a snake is stretched across warm rock in the sun, another set of eyes might catch the movement before your foot lands. If you're alone, your awareness has to be perfect all the time. No one has perfect awareness for hours. Humans don't work that way. We get comfortable, we daydream, we look at the view, we rush to make time. And the Appalachians are full of places where comfort is the moment you stop paying attention. Then there's water. Water in the mountains is deceptive. A stream looks harmless until your boot slides on algae-slick stone. A creek crossing looks easy until you realize the rocks are uneven and the current pushes your knee sideways. A shallow river looks manageable until rain upstream turns it into something faster and colder than you expected. If you hike with someone else, you can test steps. You can brace. You can help someone regain balance. Alone, a single slip can soak you. And being soaked in the Appalachians is not just uncomfortable, it's a timer. Wet clothes pull heat from your body, especially when wind shows up on ridge lines. You can't outwalk hypothermia if you're injured. You can't think clearly if you're shivering. And if you've never felt that kind of cold creep, the kind that doesn't feel like dramatic freezing, but feels like your brain slowly getting sleepy, then you don't realize how quickly it turns into bad decisions. The mountains don't need to be Arctic to be dangerous. They just need to make you wet. Now, for a moment, imagine a very ordinary scene. You're alone. You took a route you've done before. You know it. You even told yourself, this isn't a big deal. Halfway in, you decide to detour to a viewpoint you remember. There's a faint side path. You step onto it. The path is easy for a few minutes. Then it splits. You hesitate. You pick one. And now you're in that quiet green tunnel where everything looks similar. Trees, ferns, moss, leaf cover. No blazes, no clear tread. You tell yourself you'll just go until you recognize something. But recognition doesn't arrive. Instead, your breathing changes. Your jaw tightens. Because the brain is good at one thing when it senses uncertainty. It speeds up. It plays worst-case scenarios. It searches for control. This is where people make their second mistake. The first mistake is the wrong turn. The second mistake is panic movement. When panic hits, you want to fix it by moving. You push forward. You hurry. You stop paying attention to trail logic because you're hunting for relief. And that is how you get farther from where you started. The Appalachians punish panic because the terrain is complex. A ridge might funnel you in the wrong direction. A drainage might pull you downhill into thicker vegetation. A thicket might force you around in circles until you stop recognizing your own tracks. And because everything is covered in leaves and undergrowth, you can't always tell if you've been somewhere before. Now add one more detail. Your phone is at 10%. The screen is dim. You try to open maps. The little arrow spins, and you realize in a clear, sharp moment that you are alone in a place that doesn't care. That moment is why you should never hike alone here. Not because it always ends badly, but because when it does go wrong, it goes wrong quietly. And quietly is harder to survive. There's another risk people don't like to say out loud. Humans. The vast majority of people you'll meet on Appalachian trails are normal hikers, friendly, tired, kind, focused on their own trip. But remote areas, by definition, these are places where the world has fewer eyes. And fewer eyes changes behavior. Sometimes that means nothing. Sometimes it means someone feels comfortable doing something they wouldn't do where there are witnesses. Sometimes it means you stumble onto evidence of something you weren't meant to see. An illegal camp, a hidden stash, a place that feels wrong. And if you're alone, you don't have the simplest form of safety that humans have relied on for thousands of years. A second person? A witness? A deterrent? Even if you never encounter anyone with bad intentions, solitude changes how secure you feel. And the moment you feel unsafe, your decisions can become rushed, and rushed decisions in the Appalachians lead back to the same problems: wrong turns, injuries, exhaustion. Now, let's take a breath. Because none of this means you should fear the mountains. It means you should respect the kind of danger they offer. Appalachian danger is not a single dramatic event. It's a chain of ordinary things that stack up. Distance plus fatigue, wet plus wind, pride plus daylight. A small injury plus no partner. A wrong turn plus no one to argue. And the mountains are very good at creating those chains. Here's what hiking with someone else really does. It doesn't make you invincible. It makes you slower to fail. It gives you options. If you lose a trail, two people can stop and think without feeling like time is a predator. If you get injured, one person can stay while the other seeks help. If you get tired, someone can notice before you hit the cliff edge of exhaustion. If weather changes, someone can say the sentence you don't want to say, "We should turn around." If you start making dumb decisions, someone can call you on it. Alone, you are both the leader and the follower. You are the one who decides. And you are the one who has to live with that decision if it's wrong. Now, let's make this practical. Because you might hear all this and think, okay, but I still want to hike alone. People do. Sometimes it's scheduling. Sometimes it's solitude. Sometimes it's the feeling that being alone is the point. If you insist on hiking solo, you need to replace the missing person with systems. You need to make your life boring to the mountains. That starts before you step onto the trail. You tell someone exactly where you're going. Not the mountains, not a trail near the park, the trail name, the trailhead, the direction, your planned turnaround time, and what time they should worry if they haven't heard from you. You carry a real light source, not because you plan to hike at night, but because night doesn't ask what you planned. You carry warmth that doesn't depend on movement, a layer that stays warm even if you're wet, a way to block wind. You carry something that can make sound that your voice can't. A whistle. You carry more water than you think you'll need, and you know where you can safely get more. You carry a paper map or a downloaded offline map, and you know how to read it when your screen doesn't. And you do the hardest thing. You decide in advance that you will turn around. Not when it feels comfortable, when the plan says, because the mountains love the moment you say, just a little farther. Now, let's go back to that opening scene. The quiet parking lot, the one bar of signal, the rounded, gentle hills. Imagine you're alone and you've been hiking for hours. You're deeper in now. The trail has narrowed. The forest is darker. The wind is colder. You check your phone. No service. And you realize you've been relying on it anyway. Your feet are sore. Your water is low. The next viewpoint is supposed to be close. You can almost feel it. That sense of accomplishment. This is the moment that decides how stories end. Because this is where solo hikers get trapped. Not by the mountain, by the voice in their own head. The voice that says, "You came this far. You can't turn around now. You'll feel stupid. You'll waste the trip." But the mountains don't reward pride. They reward planning. So you stop. You take a breath. You look at the sky through the branches. You notice the light has shifted. You notice the wind on the ridge. You notice the damp chill in your shirt. And you do something that feels small, but is actually huge. You choose to leave. You turn around while you still have energy. You turn around before darkness. You turn around before the weather. You turn around before you need luck. Because luck is not equipment. Luck is not a plan. Luck is the thing people talk about after. And in the Appalachian Mountains, after is not guaranteed. If you've ever wondered why these mountains produce so many stories of people who swear they were turned around by fog, stories of hikers found miles from where they intended to go, stories of trails that feel like they rearrange themselves, it isn't because the mountains are magical. No, it's because the conditions are perfect for human error. Dense forests, complex terrain, fast weather, long distances, limited communication, and a culture that romanticizes solitude. When you're alone, romance turns into risk. When you're with someone, solitude becomes something else. Shared, human, safer. So here's the simplest version of the lesson. The Appalachian Mountains don't need to be extreme to be unforgiving. They just need you to be alone when something ordinary goes wrong. A slip, a wrong turn, a storm, a dying phone, a knee that decides it's done. And the mountains, patient as they are, will wait for those moments. They've been waiting for a very long time. They will still be there next weekend. Next month, next year, the trail doesn't care if you finish today. Fourth, the view doesn't care if you reach it. The summit doesn't hand out prizes for stubbornness. But your life does care. Your family does care. The people who might have to search for you do care. And the version of you who wants to hike again, who wants to come back in autumn when the leaves ignite the ridges in red and gold, that version of you should care, too. Because the best hike is not the one where you proved something. It's the one you walked out of. So don't give the Appalachians your bravado. Give them your respect. Bring a partner. Bring a plan. And if you ever catch yourself whispering, just a little farther, hear it for what it is, not motivation. A warning. Turn around while you still can. Then come back. Not alone.